Hello, everybody. Good morning or good evening from wherever you are tuning in. I'm super thrilled and already sweating from the excitement to talk to Dr. Arielle Schwartz today. And I'm just super thankful for having you today on the show. So thank you for taking this time together.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been lovely
Mhm.
to connect thus far.
So before we jump into the conversation, and as I said before recording, I also need a kind of centering, slowing down practice so that I can be fully here, really fully embodied in the conversation and slow like the pace down. So if you
Mhm.
feel inspired to lead something for all of us, that would be awesome.
My pleasure. I'm going to slide back just a little bit to do so because it will help for a little bit of visual purposes. And I'll invite us all to take a moment to arrive, just noticing what you are bringing with you into this moment.
Mhm.
Noticing the state of mind, whether your mind feels like it's jumping around or feels really present and clear, feels heavy, and knowing that there's no right or wrong state of mind to be in as we arrive. It's allowing yourself to know what you're bringing with you into this moment, and with generosity and compassion and not judgment, greeting yourself as you are. And then the invitation is to notice the state of your body, whether there's tension or ease. Once again,
Yeah.
allowing yourself to be here just a little bit more fully. And then I'll invite you to notice your breath. Whether your breath is moving easily or whether there's constriction, and it gives you feedback about the state of your nervous system, of mind and body. Sometimes just bringing awareness to your breath inspires a little bit of a deeper breath. And if that occurs, just welcome that. And our breath is so deeply connected to our emotions. And so also taking a moment to notice what emotions are present for you here and now. That might be excitement, it might be grief, it might be anywhere in between. And as Rumi says, allowing these to move through you, to sweep through you, they might be clearing you out for some new delight. And being present with your emotional body helps bring more of the fullness of you into the space. And our last point of check-in is with your energy. Whether your energy is expansive, maybe dispersed, maybe it's contracted, heavy, fatigued. And once again, without judgment, can you welcome yourself as you are in this moment? Offering that curiosity. What does that emotional state, that energetic state, provide you with? How does it give you feedback about yourself right now? I call this the 5-point check-in: mind, body, breath, emotions, energy, as a way to tune into your whole self. And I'll invite you now to bring your palms together, just to slowly make contact, palm to palm. A little bit of waking up into the palms, into your body with this self-applied touch. Again, perhaps infusing your hands with loving kindness or an intention to be deeply compassionate to yourself, toward yourself. And if you would like, bringing your palms to your face, just sweeping from the center of your forehead outward toward your temples, maybe greeting your hairline, maybe across your cheeks toward your ears. And then from your shoulders down to your elbows. It's like giving yourself a hug. And again, that welcoming yourself into this moment, here and now. If you'd like, you can even allow your gaze to move around your space or into our shared Zoom space together, our technology space, into points of connection, cues of safety, cues that let you know this moment is here for you. And then perhaps palm to palm at heart center. Thanking yourself for showing up for yourself in this way. Opening yourself to receive this conversation. Allowing it to nourish you. And allowing yourself to be here now. Mm.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Pandiculation to me is always like a way to, reactivate
Yeah.
whenever I feel too. Hmm. So there is like kind of a sensation that I felt right now when you were leading the practice, and that I actually find when I hear you or watch you on webinars or read your books as well. This kind of invitation towards wholeness, towards
Mm-hmm.
kind of gathering all parts of us, either the very scientific aspect, which I'm a nerd of and I really feel nourished by, but also the spiritual aspect of it, and the fragmented parts of themselves. Like, how can we recognize the entire systems, even systems as a plural, that we are, and like contain all of it into who we are now? And it feels just like kind of an inner revolution, really, compared to like the society that we all tend to grow up in. Like this invitation to fragment yourself, to go seek for something else outside because you're not enough or too much, or and it's always like, wow, like kind of chaotic to me. Like, I can feel sometimes absorbed by the outside excitement, but in a very heavy way, and then like centering back and containing, and like we did physically, just offering a real container for myself. It just feels so warm. So yeah. Yeah.
Just hearing that feedback from you feels actually like you give words to what that intention is for the practice, to kind of arrive with each of those koshas, right? The layers of the self, if we think in the yogic terms, and the sheaths of self, and we welcome ourselves back in into the container of self so that we can, as I shared at the end, really be here for this experience. You speak about that fragmenting and that compartmentalization or the dispersion that happens of our energy when we're out in the world. And I think yoga helps us gather ourselves upon ourselves.
Beautiful. And do you feel that therapy can have like the same kind of aiming or goal, quote unquote, even though the goal of yoga and therapy aren't like similar really, but like the same intention?
Yeah.
Mm,
Absolutely. I think it depends
mm,
on how therapy is conducted.
mm, mm, mm,
But for me, I started studying body-centered psychotherapy the same year that I completed my yoga teacher training, which was almost 30 years ago. And the experience of embodiment as part of the healing process, to me, there's no other way to go about this. But I'm also aware that there's many therapies out there that are quite disembodied.
yeah, definitely. And I was wondering, why do you think, and that can sound super simple for you because you're so immersed into it, but why do
Mm.
you think it's so needed and important and necessary to take take care of the body and include the body into therapy? Because
Yeah.
I don't know, in the US, maybe the somatic psychology realm is more developed, but in France, and that's also why I stopped psychology actually, it was all in the
Mhm.
psyche, not even the mind, but really the
That's
psyche.
right.
So I was wondering, why do you think or feel it is so important?
Yes. When we look at the symptoms, our
Mm,
mental health symptoms or emotional symptoms, we tend to see experiences of anxiety or depression or post-traumatic stress as these symptoms that are happening related to how we're thinking or memories that we have. They're faulty thinking patterns. But in truth, how we experience those symptoms are here,
mm,
right? We feel the tightness in the belly or the bracing in the chest or the knot in the throat or the butterflies. We feel the shakiness. We're not sleeping at night. We lose our appetite. All of the symptoms of anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress are body-centered.
mm,
They live here.
mm,
And so when we think that the only way out of that place is to change how we're thinking,
mm,
we only get a small part of the equation. Part of what I love about my work is applying the polyvagal theory into psychology and yoga.
mm,
Polyvagal theory looks at the autonomic nervous system as related to the vagus nerve, and we'll talk more about that, but it looks at the physiology
mm,
of our threat response and how we have this communication system between the belly, right, this belly brain, and the heart and the brain that's up in our head. And they're inseparable.
mm,
And we are really needing all of the information in the body for our brains to do the best possible job to find balance, to help us sleep again or digest our food. So we ultimately need to work with the body to attend to those mental health symptoms, to find relief. We also want to work with the mind.
mm,
We don't want to throw that away, right? We want to really attend to what are the beliefs we carry?
mm,
What narrative am I telling myself? But if we can do both the bottom up and the top down, then we've really got a beautiful healing equation.
Beautiful. So then it's more complete. It's not again like perpetuating a fragmentation inside the body itself. Like if we
Yes.
were ashamed or not interested in the body because only the psyche is like drawing all our attention, and actually
Yeah.
it's not full really. So coming back to fullness while fully intervening in the entire system. So yeah, makes a lot of sense, right? But
Yeah.
I don't know if you see any like acceleration in the psychology realm and the world, if it's really starting to fully be interested in the body, or do you think it's still a little bit shy, or how is it?
We see a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
Within the somatic arena, we see a huge amount of acceleration, and Bessel van der Kolk assisted with this tremendously because of his research, because of The Body Keeps the Score, his book. And he helped bridge the gap between the medical field and psychiatry and psychology. But we also see a whole lot of pushback against somatics. And so we're still trying to navigate an understanding of the value of this. And it's not a protocol, so it's harder to research or measure, right? If you look at cognitive behavioral therapy, which is a beautiful model, CBT, I don't have any problems with it, other than it's not the whole thing, it's not the whole picture. But you can protocolize that, and therefore you can research it much more easily than a body-centered, much more intuitive, much more attuned, listening, dialoguing with the felt sense in the body. It's harder to measure.
Yeah, definitely. And maybe like somatic experiencing from Peter Levine, for example, may have like the tendency to be more protocolized, maybe in a way. Not even sure. Yeah. Yeah, it's so spiritual as well. So it's combining like science and spirituality, like
It's
challenge.
true.
Yeah.
It's true. I love somatic experiencing, and I can't imagine trying to put it in a box
Yeah.
because, as you said, it's so spiritual. And what I hear in that is that it really relies upon the meaning-making systems of each individual, that we're allowing this depth and richness. It's like the dark, fertile soil of a garden. And yes, we can plant certain seeds in there and we can water them and we can, give adequate sunlight to predict their growth. But the nutrients in that soil are what each individual bring to the exchange into the process. And sometimes if we've grown up in very deficient systems, that soil needs a whole lot of enrichment before the seeds we plant are going to sprout.
So this kind of nourishment process, do you call it like resourcing, or how do you name it? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So in the trauma-informed care, the models that I've trained in, and I'm sure you're aware of this, focus on resource development. And sometimes that can take a year before we're really going to start to see that take hold and that growth orientation, because the early experiences we have in life, whether we had a good enough attachment, whether we felt loved, whether we felt understood, whether we had support to listen to our bodies, to trust our intuition, or sometimes we grow up in environments where we have to perform, where we have to disconnect from the body in order to belong. And when that occurs, we actually see this mind-body split beginning in infancy. Right?
So it's so wired, then it's like it's the way we are, quote unquote. Like
That's right.
I'm just like that, like that's how I am. Well, that's how you are used to be, or to adapt
That's
to the circumstances that you've experienced. Yes, definitely.
yeah.
Yeah, there is
Yeah.
a shift in perspective, like to step back and to balance like the needs and the things that you received or the things that you haven't received, and not blaming anyone, like everyone is doing their best. And
That's
still,
right.
like both are true, right? And that's pretty essy, right? Like we can hold both. Like I'm
Yeah.
lacking and they are doing their best. And that's it. Like, and how can I center with the both truths inside me? So that's very yogic as well, like the duality or
Yes.
non-duality. And that's so
That's right.
beautiful. And that's what I really appreciate into your work as well, like kind of bridging the two world, because it's really world, really like
Yes.
an entire system, and make it kind of accessible to, because I
Yes.
guess, and I'm super thankful to be living in the 21st century, to have access to all this knowledge and this wisdom out there. It's so rich, like to just even this conversation, to click on it and to listen or watch, to it's huge, really. So I'm super thankful for this work.
So true. You said something so important in there that I want to loop back to, which was about the integration of polarities
Yeah.
and how it is both a key concept in psychology and good psychology, I believe. We see it in Gestalt. We see it in somatic experiencing, right? We see it in Jungian psychology, that integration of the polarities within us. And we see it in yoga, as you said, that there is a way in which, whether it's the, the Ida and the Pingala, right? These two kind of core nadis in the body, and we also see it in the nervous system.
Yeah.
Right? How those represent, in a way, our sympathetic and our parasympathetic states. And that ultimately what we're trying to create in the sense of union or to yoke, which is the yogic, perspective here, is to come to this understanding that ultimately, when we can work with the polarities long enough, they bring us into a new reality. They awaken a new experience. I was recently receiving a Yoga Nidra practice, and often in Yoga Nidra, we are invited to work with those polarities as they show up. Right? And you can arrive, for example, at a sense, I'll share the one that I was working with, a sense of over responsibility, being overburdened, taking everything on. And then we are invited to sense, well, what's the opposite of that? For me, the opposite was irresponsibility, somehow rebellion, right? And then to sense what might be in the middle of this. Either I'm taking everything on or I'm not willing to take anything on. And ultimately, neither of those can be satisfying. What's the new reality that can emerge from that conflict? In my case, it was a sense of self-responsibility, which became freedom.
Wow.
Right? And that there is this right action that we speak about often in yoga. And clarity or nonviolence or sausha, right? Like we have these principles within the yogic systems, these guidelines on how to live a fulfilling life.
Beautiful. A life that is right to us as well, and to clear out the spaces and the things and the concepts and beliefs, as you named as well, the narratives that aren't aligned really to what we are and who we want to be. So that's such a vast field as well of tools, really, and resources and really like kind of resilience-based approaches that we can adapt into our daily lives. And that's something that you develop really deep. And I was wondering, because resiliency really become like a buzzword kind of, and so I was wondering what your understanding, or even more what your embodiment of resiliency feels like, or is like.
Great. I think part of the challenge of the word resilience is that it gets misunderstood sometimes as this kind of self-reliance, this idea that somehow the only way for me to be resilient is to pull myself up by my bootstraps. That's an American saying, at least. I don't know if it translates into French, but there's this way in which I just have to be okay, even if I'm not okay. I just have to persevere. And the truth is that resilience sometimes requires that kind of willful action, and sometimes it requires more of a receptivity, a willingness to receive support. When we look at some of the core components of resilience, it has to do with not isolating yourself, seeking connection and community, having access to resources, being willing to become more vulnerable. And so it's not always about willfully pressing forward and being strong. It's also about being soft. And it's also very yogic, right? In my yoga training, we get trained about this balance between willful action and surrender and softness and receptivity. And in the tradition I'm trained in, those are described as the two wings of the bird that have to function in tandem for us to take flight. Yeah. But one more piece that I'll offer around the embodiment of resilience is that if we think of willful action and that strength side of the equation, that's our sympathetic nervous system. It is our mobilization system. It helps us fight. It helps us run away. It helps us protect ourselves. Mm-hmm. And we actually really need our sympathetic nervous system. And when we're not in a threat response, our sympathetic nervous system helps us play, get exercise, climb a mountain, go to a dance class, engage in willful practice of yoga, right? We can really enjoy that sympathetic system. We also need our parasympathetic system, which is softening, rest and digest, relaxation response. Mm-hmm. And if we're only in our parasympathetic system, it can roll over into fatigue, collapse, shutdown, withdrawal. So when we look through the lens of the autonomic nervous system, what we're really trying to achieve is this flexibility of your physiology, where you can move between sympathetic and parasympathetic with relative ease. You're not stuck in the sympathetic and you're not stuck in the parasympathetic, but that you can actually find this capacity to rise up to meet a challenge and recover from it and sleep well at night.
Beautiful. Yeah, I love the image of a wave. Really, like, a flat life equals death. Really, like, if there is no movement, there is no life, aliveness, really. So it's not about being into balance all the time. And like, a balance is not like an end point. It's really an organic, dynamic movement in and of itself. So I really appreciate that reminder as well. And I appreciate the relative access to resources, for example, and I know we both know, and the audience as well, maybe even concerned by it, but I'm a white woman, living in France, so I'm kind of fully accepted in the model in which I grew up, and I don't know what the experience of being a Black woman, for example, feels like, and so I'm very interested into how yoga can sometimes perpetuate systemic oppression and how we can make those spaces and practices more equals or more accessible or at least informed by them. And so I was curious how you see or how you consider like a trauma-informed, for example, or a systemic oppression-informed yoga space and how you lead them.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that really stands out for me around yoga is that it was always offered quite freely to me. Right? It was like most of the early classes that I took when I really started to develop my own personal practice were either donation-based or were community classes. And it made it very accessible for me to be able to go and take classes and to really heal myself. I also sought out therapy at that time, but I was really suffering in my late teens, early 20s. And when I would go to a yoga class, it was a community class, and I would feel better by the end of class. My mind stopped racing around. I would often cry, but I would feel more connected to myself. And I really took that model to heart in the sense that, I've either been teaching in our community rec center, which I did for 20 years here for $5 drop-in classes, or I grew into when the pandemic hit and my classes moved online for the first time. It was deeply, deeply important to me to live into that value system where all of a sudden the world took significant financial hits. People struggled to have access to resources. And so I made my classes simply donation based, and then I put them on YouTube so that they're freely accessible. And that aligns with that value system of this is your birthright to have access to this information, no matter who you are, what your background is, what your suffering is. And the other piece that speaks to your question is in the trauma-informed approach or the systemic oppression-informed approach to yoga, we need to recognize the power and privilege of our role and I think too often when we go to a yoga class, the yoga teacher tells you what to do with your body.
Mm.
Take this shape, perfect it in this way, follow this alignment, breathe this way.
Mm.
And it's in itself, it can have an unintended violence, right?
Mm.
It can be perceived by us as now we are aggressively trying to fit into what they expect or to change ourselves to be perfect in some way. And it fuels an internal oppressive system. So the trauma-informed approach looks at everything as an invitation, honors how your body feels, how you want to move, creates space for organic listening and trusting and knowing that you are your greatest teacher. And I'm simply a guide. And I deeply bow to that teacher that is in you. So on the yoga mat, does that mean that we throw out all of the structure of the practice? I don't believe so. It means that we can engage in a guided practice, but that every single posture becomes what I refer to as a home base or a secure base for exploratory movement.
Mm.
So, for example, if you do take a practice that includes something like a downward facing dog, right? An Adho Mukha Savasana, right? That we can take that shape and then make it yours. How does your body want to engage in that shape, knowing that also you might opt out of that shape, and there's nothing wrong with doing so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, beautiful. And I really appreciate the highlighting of also using the practice as like an observation viewpoint with, all the narratives and the oppression that we've internalized. Like as you just mentioned, like there's nothing wrong with it. And how often I could hear into myself, like, "Oh, you're thinking too much right now. Like you're not doing yoga right." And I'm like, "Oh, am I supposed to come to a yoga class to judge myself, to be judging myself? Like, is that really yoga?" So that was super interesting to really step back from my own, inner conflicts, as we said, and like how to embrace those and how to have more compassion and integrate it towards them. So that's very supportive, I guess. Mm.
Yes. Yes.
Beautiful. And I have another question that comes to mind, and actually, well, that comes to mind or that comes to psyche. And maybe you can help
Uh-huh.
me with that. Like, what's the difference for you? And in French, well, mind is esprit, but mind and mental, well, yeah, there are two words as well, but how do you define both? And do you see any
Mhm.
differences between mind and psyche?
Yeah. First of all, I love the Greek etymological origins of the word psyche, because psyche in Greek refers to the soul.
Mm, beautiful. Mm.
Yeah. And so now we have, and what I love in the yogic concept is that we also have layers of the mind,
Mm.
right? We have our intellectual mind, our thinking that is based on previous experiences and accumulation of knowledge. But then we have our wise mind, our wisdom mind. And wisdom is much more about tapping into this deeper archetypal collective unconscious. It's about tapping into that wisest self that somehow just deeply intuits what needs to happen next, or where do I go, or what am I going to say? And so we can speak from this mind, but when we look at intuition mind or wise mind, I believe that that mind is linking all three of our intelligence centers. We have all of the same neurotransmitters that we find in the brain located here in the belly
Mm.
and located here in the heart and located here in the brain, right? And so the vagus nerve hooks up, links up these three brains: our belly brain,
Mm.
our heart wisdom brain, and the brain in our heads. So we can actually live in embodied intelligence. And if we think about that sense of soul, that soulfulness. It is this embodied spirituality, right? It is a way of like deeply trusting that intelligence within us.
Such a profound invitation. And again, like this yoking, gathering as well, knowledge, but also felt experience as well. And once
Yeah.
again, that's something that I really, really find is different into your work. And that's why I so wanted to have you on. So I'm super thrilled and yeah, really. And I'm also aware of the time and I could speak to you for days, I know, but I also wanted to be
Yeah.
respectful of yours. And so I was wondering if you have any upcoming events or workshops and of course you have your weekly YouTube classes that are, as
Yeah.
you said, free on YouTube, and I really
Yeah.
really recommend everyone to try them out, so feel free to share
Oh,
anything.
yeah. Thank you. Thank you. So yes, on my website, which is drarielleschwartz.com, and I also have a new website, resilienceinformedtherapy.com. They both share the resources and the trainings that are coming up. And also within them, you can find out when the next yoga class is happening. So, please do join us for a live class or catch them on YouTube at Dr. Arielle Schwartz on YouTube. And then you will also find the opportunities to connect in person for some upcoming trainings, whether that is on Zoom or physically face to face. I have a training that's happening in the UK, June 21st and 22nd. So that is one upcoming opportunity. I also have my next round of the 30-hour applied polyvagal theory and yoga that is going to be on Zoom with Embody Lab, and it starts up again in December. This will be maybe my 6th or 7th time teaching that whole course, and it keeps evolving and growing. And I'll also just share that in the meantime, get to know the work. The new book is The Applied Polyvagal Theory in Yoga. And that is primarily for practitioners.
Mm.
And then if you are just here for your own yoga practice, check out Therapeutic Yoga for Trauma Recovery. That really gives you the whole model with lots of pictures and ways to follow along with the theory and the practice. And then also for practitioners, there is the Therapeutic Yoga for Trauma flip chart that guides you into a better understanding of your nervous system
Mm.
through, kind of pictures that represent the polyvagal theory, and then ultimately take you into practices that are based on that theory. So there's lots of resources out there, but again, for equity's sake, all the YouTube is free and the classes are donation based. So I look forward to connecting with you again.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Ariel, for everything that you are
You.
doing, but also for this time together and how you beautifully weave your two kind of interests and main interests, even though I know you're passionate about many things as well, but really it's very meaningful and important. So thank you so much.
So deeply grateful.
Thank you.